have a ton of stuff to cover in just 60 minutes, so let's jump right to it. Let's get the very first item up for bid on the Newswire, and it's Vasyl Lomachenko donates $600,000 of his purse to Teofimo Lopez in order to make the lightweight unification bout a stark reality. So Vasyl Lomachenko, he was projected to make or proposed to make $3.25 million. Now it's been reduced to $2.65 million. And Lopez's initial purse goes from $1.2 million to $1.8 million. Rodney, are you a bit surprised about this, or is this just the realism of the boxing business coming to fruition?
I think it's just the realism of the current state of affairs of boxing right now. You have to look at, really start making a business decision kind of like right now. So if you have a bird in a hand and you have a possibility to make some money and feed your family, that should take precedence over boxing politics right now. Because let me tell you, these fights are no guarantee they're going to come back around, or you just can't say next 4 or 5 months I'll be fighting again. So I think, have an opportunity to make a fight. So I think it was a very classy move by Lomachenko, and I think he's showing his Teofimo Lopez that, you know what, you said some pretty harsh things, what you was going to do to me. Now you're going to have to back it up now, because, see, now I'm willing to reduce my pay to give you the opportunity for everything that you said. Well, now it's time for you to stand and deliver. But if you don't, well, guess what? It really could be a reflection of you now. So I really, applaud Lomachenko for taking that disposition. I really do.
Absolutely, guys, and once again, both men have had to, because this fight, when you look at all the marbles at 135, right, this is to be the man at 135. Lomachenko, obviously not only the ring champion at 135, but he's also one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And so this fight should be worth a lot more, but because we don't have the live gate, because we don't have the benefit of the pay-per-view platform or closed circuit, they're both having to take reduced money to make this fight a reality. But I think at this stage, boxing needs that shot in the arm with great matchups, and this has been projected for October 3rd. But there's a greater reason, though, and this is something that fight fans need to understand, Rodney. There's another reason why this happened. And it's one of the things that fans, and I can't stand all this talk. Like, whenever I go to forums or I'll hear guys actually talk about, Lomachenko's ducking Lopez, or all that talk from Lopez, he's ducking Vasyl Lomachenko. He's pricing himself out. Guys, the reality is, and I can't stand when people talk about ducking, right? Because that's a fan-driven concept that genuinely doesn't exist in the sport of boxing. Either a fight makes sense, a matchup either makes sense or it doesn't at a specific point in a fighter's respective career. There is no such thing as ducking in the business. Now, there is such a thing as risk versus reward factor, right? But once again, it either makes sense for a specific fighter in their respective careers. But, Rodney, it's like people don't understand. For all intents and purposes, these guys are business partners. Regardless of what they say to the media, regardless of what they actually say in Twitter or on Facebook, they're business partners. Let me put it this way. Like, here's proof of this, right? Here's some quotes from Vasyl Lomachenko, right? He said this on what's called Loma TV. It's his YouTube channel, right? They said, hey, how do you feel about all the trash talking that Teofimo Lopez has said in the build-up to the fight? And he goes, he's great. I've already said it. He's doing all the work for both of us. I don't need to shout anything. I don't need to proclaim anything at all. I don't need to tease him or humiliate him. He does it all. He's doing a great job promoting the fight. They're all doing it with his dad, by the way, and they're doing it really well. That's why. Thanks, guys. They're business partners. And like let me put it this way, right? Rodney, if you and I did something, like if we had a radio show and I knew my success, I couldn't have it without my partnership or my collaborative effort with you, and we both made $1 million, and I knew it was by your hard work as well as mine, you would be receiving, sir, for the rest of my natural life, a nice Christmas fruit basket every year. Commemorate. Like, have you guys ever wondered why these fighters will meet, like after they've retired, and they'll see each other at the WBC convention, and they'll embrace each other, and they'll take pictures together smiling, and that's because they just made each other millions of dollars. Like, did you remember how poorly Roberto Duran treated Sugar Ray Leonard in the promotion of that fight? Said he was more man than him, and he was going to beat the tar out of him.
Yep. Yes, sir.
And then you see them now laughing and embracing with each other and taking pictures, and you know what they're saying. Oh, yeah, boy, we made each other a lot of money, didn't we?
Yep.
So, Rodney, what are your thoughts on this, man? And is this something, it's almost like kayfabe, right? Do you know what kayfabe is, Rodney, with WWE, WWF, old wrestling? It was the soap opera, and you had to keep that facade up that they really, the bad guys really hated the good guys in wrestling. It's almost like kayfabe in boxing, right? What are your thoughts on this? And is this something that, for the health of the sport and for the benefit of the fans, the fighters kind of play this role and they act like they hate each other?
Oh, yeah. Well, again, we have to understand that this is the entertainment business as well as the boxing business. And guys like Teofimo, I think they are a valued commodity in the sport. You need guys like that, especially in a climate like this where, a fight has to be promoted as much as possible because, as I said, with all the restrictions, with the lack of gate, pay-per-view, restrictions as well, a guy like Teofimo can drum up that interest and everything. And it's going to be some that's going to, based off of his promotion, give him the benefit of the doubt to think that he can back it up and win. So I think that it's great, though. And as I said, no one is ducking. 135 is such a talent-laden division with some real young guns and studs. So, I think it's going to bring more light to the fighters there. And I think by us having Teofimo and Lomachenko, that's going to create buzz for Devin Haney, Gervonta Davis, and I think it's going to have just a good domino effect, though. But nevertheless, though, the fight is almost signed. Last I checked, they said they was going to have it ironed out by the end of the week, Joseph. As far as
that's right. It's projected to be signed, sealed, and delivered by the end of the week, and they're still targeting. And I love this. They're still targeting October 3rd, Rodney.
Perfect.
Boy, it can't come soon enough.
So, with that said, hopefully this creates a positive trend for other fighters or other fighters with, no loss on their record, a lot at stake to say, you know what, maybe 3-4 years ago we could have held out and asked for a different amount or type of purse. But, now, man, with such uncertainty, we have to cooperate a little bit better. And you're right. Win, lose, or draw, I need my opposition just as much as he needs me right now, because at the end of the day, we got into this sport because we love it, but we got to feed our family as well. So I hope that, sentiment becomes more and more as we, deal with these just new and unpredictable times with, the way boxing is being shown in the platform right now.
Indeed, very well said, brother. And, and that's the reality, guys. Now, of course, these guys understand, and when they get in the ring, they're looking at their opponent saying, this guy is trying to keep me from reaching the land of milk and honey. And they're fierce competitors, and their egos will not allow them to think any other way in the ring. But outside of the ring, guys, both of these gentlemen are business partners, and that's the reality of it. This guy's ducking. No, stop it. But I tell you what, you know what, Rodney, here's something else. And I just heard this interview, right, with Jorge Linares. He's been in the ring with Vasil Lomachenko before. Very spirited effort. Excellent fight several years ago. I think it was back in 2017.
Right.
And he stated this recently on an interview. I just saw this just a couple days ago on Fight Hub TV, in which he stated Vasil Lomachenko is still a very good fighter, and he's still very smart with a really high ring IQ. He goes, but he's not the same. He's not the same guy. This is a different fighter. I don't know if it's because of all the wear and tear, the 400 amateur fights, the fact that he's 32, but he is not the same guy who I fought in 2017. Yes, Teofimo Lopez, he's going to give him a lot of trouble, he said, but this is not the same guy. Your thoughts on that, and have you seen the same thing in his last 3 fights?
Well, he hasn't looked as dynamic in his last 3 fights. Now, with that being said, sometimes a guy like Lomachenko can be so good to where it's like, you know what, I can beat this guy really just with minimal effort, okay? So it just depends on how we want to look at it. But I will say this, though. He took some punishment in the fight with Linares as well. And boxing is one of those sports where, I've seen it where you can grow old overnight. I've seen it happen in all my years of watching. Now, I don't want to put that label on Lomachenko. But Linares, one thing I will give him credit. He's a very, very smart, technical-like fighter. So for him to say something like that does raise an eyebrow, okay, because maybe he's seeing something that the overall public is not seeing because he has such an experienced and keen eye. So it's going to be very interesting to see if there's any significant slippage in Lomachenko, because at this level, all it takes is 1 to 2 to 3% slippage to where you're ordinary and not so much extraordinary in this boxing game.
Indeed, and when you're taking on a young badass like Teofimo Lopez, who is explosive, has been blessed with cat-like reflexes, and, boy, he's got great explosive power in both hands. When you're taking on a real stud like Teofimo Lopez, can you afford any slippage, Rodney?
No, there's no room for error. Because, see, that's the thing with Lopez. See, his power gives him a hell of a shot. He's a live dog, whether we like it or not, because his power is such a game changer. Now, as I said, it's going to be interesting with Lomachenko being such a skilled fighter, man, such a ring IQ. On the same token, Teofimo hasn't faced that type of excellence, I believe, yet. He's been able fight fighters with, some pretty decent resume and some pretty, but, man, this is such a different level of competition. But as I said, though, I wouldn't discard what Linares said because, to be honest, man, Linares gave Lomachenko everything he could handle.
He floored him for the first time in his career. He caught him with a straight right hand down the middle. Lomachenko did a great job coming back the following round, but and he ended up getting the late round stoppage. But don't forget, Jorge Linares touched him up a bit and caught him with a straight right hand. Now, since then, think about this, Rodney. Think about this. Since after 2015, right? Lomachenko garnered the moniker of Lomachenko. Remember that? Because he had retired 8 consecutive fighters, right? Caused 5 guys consecutively to quit on their stools. And since then, he's had kind of a mixed bag of results. Obviously, he's been victorious, but against Jose Pedraza, a guy that Gervonta Davis blew out of the water, right? He went on to get a unanimous decision, hard-fought victory over Jose Pedraza, blew out the way overmatched Anthony Crolla, right? No one thought that was going to be close. But then he struggled a little bit against the very affable Luke Campbell, right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And we're gonna be talking about him a little later on in the show. Looks like he's reached an agreement. He and Eddie Hearn, his promoter, have reached an agreement with Ryan Garcia and Golden Boy Promotions. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the show. But that's, so maybe, perhaps, Jorge Linares is onto something. We'll see. But once again, like you stated earlier, perhaps Lomachenko just didn't get up for those fights. Perhaps we're going to see a truly motivated Lomachenko. Well, time will reveal everything, and I tell you what, October 3rd can't get here any sooner. I love it. Thank you so much, Top Rank, for bringing us this fight, and thank you, business partners Lomachenko and Lopez, for getting this thing done. Expect this contract to be signed by both parties within the next couple of days, guys. We should hear an announcement very soon. Your final thoughts on this, Rodney, before we start talking about Bob Arum and Eddie Hearn trying to make Terence Crawford versus Kell Brook for November?
Well, subsequently, I personally I'm just excited to see this type of fight of this magnitude take place. I think we have a situation to where the promoters realize we have to strike now. Okay, we can't wait. And I think regardless what happens, I think win, lose, or draw, both Lomachenko and Teofimo will still be able to have a outstanding career and still get those big money fights going forth because they're setting a precedent saying, you know what, the best are going to fight the best, and I think they'll be rewarded in the future because they're setting the foundation in the place for bigger persons going forward.
Very well said, brother. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is, one, Canelo, I hope you're paying attention because that's how it's done. Rather than trying to shake down DAZN for every penny and trying to actually, make your opponents take lesser money, perhaps it should be the other way around. Just get the damn fight done, or else you're going to be on the shelf till 2021. Thanks for playing, brother. I'll say that. Guys, our next item up for bid on the Boxing Newswire, Bob Arum enters discussions with Eddie Hearn, it's being reported, to put together, be still my heart, Terence Bud Crawford versus Kell Brook, Mr. Special K Chocolate Brownies, for a date in November. Rodney, I have to tell you this, and now I understand, right, that most 147-pounders aren't all that thrilled, even though Terence Crawford has a title. I understand that they're not all that anxious to step in the ring with Bud Crawford, but does this fight do anything for you, brother?
You know what? Maybe 2 years ago or a year ago, I wouldn't be too gung-ho about it or really be thrilled. But I'm looking at it as the fact that, you know what, Kell Brook may not be the same fighter, but don't sleep on him because, we've seen him fight under the light. He takes a pretty good punch. He withstood Triple G for the longest. I think what they're doing right now is trying to keep the gate or the main attraction going by having, a household name in Terence Crawford and a respectable gatekeeper in Kell Brook. Now, I think if Crawford is successful in this fight, look for him to move up, okay? I think this is a good litmus test for him to possibly go to another weight class. He's fighting a guy who really, before Triple G fight, and Kell Brook was very talented, had great reflexes still, just wonderful ability. Now, is he a total shell of himself? I'm not for sure, but I don't think he's that fighter that we're accustomed to prior to the Triple G fight. But at the end of the day, I think it still would give Terence Crawford some exposure. And, guys like I see Kell Brook are saying, you know what, if guys don't want to fight you and get a payday, I'm willing to step in and get a payday and put on a good show for the public. I think it'll be a good fight, but I see in Crawford, definitely pulling away down the stretch.
Well, he's been active, I guess. I guess you could say that. He sat out all of 2019. He fought twice in 2018, fought once earlier this year before the COVID-19 struck, right, before the pandemic. But think about this, Rodney. I'm not so convinced that this is not going to be already at 154 pounds because in his last three bouts, since getting stopped by Errol Spence Jr. in 2017, his last three fights have been at 154 pounds. So I'm not so sure. I don't know if this is going to be a title defense. Can Kell Brook still make the weight without killing himself? Because he's always been a biscuit shy of 154 pounds. I mean, this is a big welterweight, which is one of the reasons why, he really wanted to take that Golovkin fight. And he's only fought 3 times in the last 3 years, pretty much. Well, 2.5 years, right? Do you think the time off did him good? Because he was in back-to-back grueling fights in which he broke both orbital bones. And against Gennady Golovkin in 2016, he took a shellacking for 5 rounds.
Oh, absolutely.
Against Errol Spence Jr., he took a shellacking and just a beatdown, and he broke the other orbital bone. So after that, I think it was wise to give him that time off, right? Do you think maybe his body healed? Because a lot of times when you get beat down that thoroughly, right, sometimes your body just never is physically the same. Because take a look at Lucien Bute, right, former IBF super middleweight champion. When he was beat down by Carl Froch thoroughly, he was never the same after that, right? What are your thoughts? Do you think he can come back? Do you think the time off has served him well, or do you think, this is one final payday for the chocolate brownie?
I think it's a combination of both. Again, I think he is taking a page out of Amir Khan. As Amir Khan, when he wasn't the same, he started taking those fights and getting those paydays. So, this could be a replica of that. But at the same time, if I'm looking at Terence Crawford handlers, they're going to look at, say, you know what, Earl Spence beat him in, 7th round? That wasn't...
Yeah, 7th round knockout,
yeah,
yep.
7th round knockout. So they're going to say, you know what, you have to do 6 or 5 or better. And if he does that, then he possibly can say, you know what, Earl Spence, it's time for us to do this. If Earl is successful with his defense against Danny Garcia. So it's another little subplot, beneath the surface that I think will arise from this. But I do tend to think that, you know what, Kell is taking advantage of the fact that, you know what, I don't know what my future holds. I don't know about my health, because when you start having orbital surgery, that's not some type of surgery where you can just say, I'm fully recovered, I believe, especially in a sport like this. So in the meantime, as I said, fighters are starting to make business decisions that's going to serve them now, because you do not know when that carousel may come around again.
Yeah, and I have to correct us, Rodney. The Kell Brook Errol Spence fight, he just started getting battered around round 7. That's when the wheels started to come off. And because of his physical and mental durability, he lasted up until round 11. Boy, he took a beating the last 4 rounds of that fight.
And if you go back to that fight, Earl around round 6 to round 7 really started putting the pressure on him and making him fight at a pace he was uncomfortable with. Okay, so he pressed the action. He really pushed him and started walking him down and made him fight. Okay, and like I said, so I don't know about his endurance, if that's gonna be an issue this go around. But nevertheless, though, I don't dislike the fight. I don't think it's just a fight that we can look at and say, I'm not interested. So I think, it's a lot of subplots that can come from the outcome. And again, we'll see Crawford, is he still able to lay claim to being pound for pound best, whether it's top 1, top 2, or 3. I'm definitely looking forward to see if, he's lost a bit from inactivity or still has that hunger, because when you haven't fought in a while and under these conditions, you just never know how these fighters may respond. And that alone has my interest right there.
Yeah, I will say this, Rodney. Yeah, it's a bit intriguing. It's interesting on so many levels. One, how much does Kell Brook still have left? Is he still Special K? We'll see. We'll see. I'll say this, though, and this is certain, with great certainty, boy, he's going to get a lot of criticism from the fans for taking on a guy as shop-worn, seemingly, as Kell Brook, a guy seemingly on the back 9 of his career, right? Terence Crawford is going to receive a lot of criticism for this, because for some strange reason, over the last year or so, he's developed a lot of detractors who truly believe that, he's not fighting the best opponents available, even though he's a WBO welterweight champion. Now, this is how extreme these fans have become. Think about this. Instead of fighting Kell Brook, which he's going to get criticized for fighting, if he were to fight Sean Porter's next opponent, right? Unbeaten German prospect Sebastian Formella, and that's going to be on August 22nd, right, on Fox. It's going to be in the main event of the evening. Showtime Sean Porter's coming back, and he's going to be taking on Sebastian Formella, who's 22-0 with 10 knockouts. Old Seabass from Germany. Can you imagine the kind of criticism that Terence Crawford would receive if he were to fight Seabass Formella, ranked number 24 in the world? You're not hearing a peep of criticism, though, directed towards Sean Porter, are you?
Right. they see Terence Crawford as pound for pound, and you can either love him or hate him. You can find him, his accomplishments or his status to be warranted or unwarranted. But as far as his level of competition, I don't recall Terence Crawford ever turning down contracts or, to me, He was the one always trying to initiate the fights with Errol Spence. The ones who stepped up to the plate and was willing to fight, he fought them. You know what? That's such a good point, Rodney. So we're going to go into the mailbag right now. We got an email request, a question for the both of us from our good friend Antonio Luna, who's listening to the show out in Long Beach, California. Thank you for listening, Antonio. He asked us this. Guys, I'd like to know, do you think Top Rank is doing a good job with Terence Crawford? Thanks for the question, Antonio. You are absolutely right, Rodney. Because remember, the reason why, his first big break was he accepted a fight with one of the more dangerous punchers at 140 pounds when he was just campaigning as a lightweight at 135. Yeah.
He was supposed to be fighting, Bradis Prescott was supposed to be fighting on HBO on the undercard of Mike Alvarado, Brandon Rios, right? Well, he was supposed to be fighting Khabib Alikverdiev. Alikverdiev got injured, fell off the card with 2 weeks remaining before the fight card, and Tim Bradley suggested it to Bob Arum and Cameron Duncan. They both shared the same manager and said, hey, you know what? I think Terence Crawford can take this guy. Why don't you give the fight to him? He's ready, and he's going to be fighting already on the undercard. He's already training. He's already ready to fight. So they pitched the idea to Terence Crawford. Now, keep in mind, he was campaigning at 35 at the time and says, sure, man, with 2 weeks' notice, fighting on HBO? Yeah, but he's, and Bob was like, well, hey, man, you know what? We believe in you, but keep in mind, this is one of the hardest punchers at the 140-pound division. He just knocked out Amir Khan, giving him his first loss. Terence Crawford said, no problem, where do I sign? That's what kind of guy Terence Crawford is, right? Now, fast forward a couple years later. Mikey Garcia is in negotiations to fight Yuriorkis Gamboa. Mikey Garcia and his brother Robert, they're a little pissed because HBO is throwing bigger money at Yuriorkis. They're giving him the lion's share of the purse. Mikey took exception to that, saying, hey, wait a minute, I'm the current IBF champion. This guy's moving up to 35 to face me. It's like, I'm the one who should be receiving the lion's share here. This isn't right. Well, when negotiations fell apart, who did they call? Terence Crawford. Hey, do you want to step in the ring with undefeated former Olympian, knockout artist Yuriorkis Gamboa? TC said, sure, where do I sign? This is a guy who doesn't duck anybody. He does not avoid fights. He fights who is ever in front of them. This guy is a virtual nightmare to prepare for. Also, he's a switch-hitting badass. Just look at his resume. Bradis Prescott, Ricky Burns, Yuriorkis Gamboa, Raymundo Beltran, Tomas Delorme, Hank Lundy, an undefeated Victor Postal, who is coming off knocking out Lucas Matisse, John Molina Jr., Julius Ndongo, who is previously undefeated and coming off of a knockout, Jeff Horn, who is coming off of a victory over Manny Pacquiao. Formerly undefeated Jose Benavidez Jr., Amir Khan. Formerly undefeated Igas Kavalasquez, former Olympian. This is a guy who doesn't shy away from fighting anybody. So, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. So, by the way, to answer the question, of course Top Rank is doing a tremendous job with Terence Crawford. What fans don't realize, Rodney, is do you realize how much Terence Crawford actually made in his 2 appearances last year? He made $5.5 million in his pay-per-view against Amir Khan, and he made $4 million to fight Igas Velasquez. So he's got a promoter with all the TV dates, right? He's a major title holder, and he made almost a cool $10 million last year. Can you think of any other fighters, maybe a handful, that are making $10 million a year and has as many TV dates as he wants on the flagship ESPN? Yeah, I'd say Top Rank is doing a pretty good job, man. Your final thoughts on this, brother?
Well, I think so many fans, they find solace in trying to discredit someone who, for whatever reason, may not be their most liked fighter or favorite fighter. And the way you do that is say, well, you know what? He's not being promoted right. No one knows who he is, and maybe he doesn't deserve a fight with another 147-pounder on a different promotional banner. Okay? You know, I mean, again, it's silly, it's nonsense, and you're saying Top Rank. I mean, you know, you to even entertain that, you have to have a sense of illusional, because you're right. He has the TV gates. He's getting the big fights, but, you know, these guys can't make the other fighters have the balls and say, you know what, let me step up and fight you, win, lose, or draw. Okay?
You know, and a huge misconception is, Rodney, here also this, a huge misconception. A lot of people are saying, well, you know what, he needs to go across the street and sign and fight the big boys. Okay, well, he's contractually obligated to fight under the directive and under the promotional banner of Top Rank, and he's got the TV dates on ESPN, right, which everyone has in their home, right? It's a bigger platform, right? So here's what most people don't realize. Every single one of Al Heyman's fighters are not contractually obligated to any network or promotional outfit. They're all free agents. So that's the last thing I'm going to say about it.
You know, fighters are very aware of the risk when you face some of these fighters of a caliber of a Terence Crawford, or even an Earl Spence prior to him having the car accident.
Indeed, man.
And I'm just say this before we move on. You have a lot more fighters chomping at the bit since Earl Spence has went through that, you know, dramatic car accident. And as I said, at the elite level, it just takes 1% or 2% slippage before fighters can recognize and say, you know what, man, he's not the same fighter, or I may have a better chance with him than previously. So I'm just going to say, man, I hope fans stop trying to discredit these fighters or being scared or not being marketed right or not worth the risk or I mean, it's nonsense. And, man, come on. We're still doing what we did 10 years ago.
Indeed. Very well said, Rodney. And, the truth of the matter is, guys, these guys are fearless. They take punishment for your entertainment. Each one of these fighters would step in the ring with Godzilla if it had a hefty paycheck attached to it. That's the reality. I tell you what, thank you for joining us, Miss Denise Ward. She has a message for you, Rodney. She says, welcome back, Rodney Green. Much love, brother. Thank you so much for tuning in, Denise. I tell you what, let's go to the next course of business, right? Next item up for bid on the Newswire. Agreement is finally made, at least theoretically, right? And obviously they made this statement because the WBC was trying to force a virtual online purse bid, right, for Luke Campbell versus Ryan Garcia. But according to Golden Boy president Eric Gomez, both parties have reached an agreement, and it should be hashed out within the next week or so. So, so it's not official yet, but apparently it will be, according to both Matchroom Sport and Golden Boy Promotions. Luke Campbell versus Ryan Garcia. Now, this is going to be competing, right, Both men are going to
Right.
be competing for the WBC mandatory position to face Devin Haney in 2021. Boy, that's exciting. So let me ask you this, Rodney. Now, we're not going to go into the nuts and bolts of this thing until it's official, but if you had to guess, who's going to be fighting Devin Haney next year, brother?
If I have to take a guess right now, I will go with the young lion, Ryan Garcia, okay? And the reason why I say that, I see a certain hunger in him, but he's going to be tested by Campbell, okay? He's going to be tested because Campbell is such a wily veteran, man. He's very astute. He brings a lot of dimensions that Garcia hasn't seen. At the same token, man, Ryan has some things you can't teach. And, man, he throws that left hook, man, with bad intentions. And he
it's a thing of beauty, isn't it? Well, let me tell you, Rodney, and everything that you said was right on the money, right? Except I think it's going to be an easy night at the office for Ryan Garcia. Now, theoretically, it should be. Luke Campbell should test this guy. He's a veteran, deep amateur pedigree. He does a great job of using his footwork as a foundation of his defense, and he's a jabbing southpaw, right, which usually gives a lot of people problems. And because he has naturally heavy hands, he doesn't load up on any one shot, so he doesn't stay flat-footed. He's very good at moving in and out of range, using his height and his reach to his advantage, and all he has to do is just touch you, and it has an accumulative effect, and it takes its toll, and it breaks down his opponents most of the time. But there is a reason why he hasn't been able to beat the elite at 135, losing to both Jorge Linares and Vasil Lomachenko. He's tested him, but this is why Ryan Garcia is going to bomb him out and knock his ass to the ground. I've been watching fight tape of this ever since he started talking about this matchup. He's a jabbing southpaw. And what he doesn't realize is Ryan Garcia is a converted southpaw, just like Oscar De La Hoya. That's why his left hook, his check left hook, is so sharp and so quick. What he's going to do is he's going to flick out that right-hand jab, and he's going to catch that check left hook right in the chops, and it's going to be all she wrote. He doesn't, Luke Campbell, the reason why he hasn't been able to beat an elite level 35-pounder is, unlike Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, and Tank Davis, he is not blessed with those superb reflexes and speed. Doesn't have that sledgehammer in his glove, that touch of the gods, right? That Teofimo Lopez has, Ryan Garcia has, and so does Tank Davis. Those three fighters are special lightweights. Unfortunately, as wily and as crafty as Luke Campbell is, he doesn't have those natural athletic gifts to be able to beat any of the elites right now because, boy, 135, and you said it earlier, is such a special weight class right now. It truly is one of the most exciting divisions in all of boxing. Ryan, in my opinion, is going to whoop his ass.
Yeah.
That's just my assessment. Like I said, I've been watching tape ever since they started talking about this, and I just don't see how Luke Campbell can, go through the entire fight without being cracked in the chops several times with that sharp, compact check left hook. As soon as he flicks out that right hand, it's coming. So your final thoughts on this, brother, before we move on to Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones, man?
Well, this will be another opportunity for Garcia to shine. He's definitely progressed in his last couple of fights. He's even starting to get that superstar appeal. You know, I think his following is starting to grow. And if he does win in dramatic fashion, like you're predicting, well, that's great. But guess what his prize is? The ultra-talented Devin Haney.
Oh.
So,
jeez.
Be
careful what you ask for, Brian.
Yes, well, he might be facing the best at 135 in this ultra-talented position. So let's stay tuned.
Wow. Yeah, that's one to look forward to. Tell you what, though, thanks to Matchroom Sport and Golden Boy Promotions for getting it done. This is a tremendous matchup. And, it should be, coming to you very soon. We hope the announcement comes within the next 2 weeks at least. Guys, let's move forward real quick. We've got a couple more things on the agenda before we actually say goodnight to you. And the next course of action is, it was just announced, Rodney, that Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr., not only was it pushed back to Thanksgiving Saturday, November 28th, but now it was just announced today that we're going to have judges at ringside, and the WBC is going to be there with a specially made commemorative geriatric title for the eventual victor. How do you like that, man? Do you think is... I mean, I'm sorry, as you were, sir, your thoughts on this maneuver?
I like it. I really do. I think it's going to infuse a different energy into the sport of boxing. I think you're going to get some casual fans reacclimated with the sport, reinterested in the sport, and I really, really do like it. Now, we have to have a level of expectations and understand it's not going to be the Roy Jones of old, and it's not going to be the Mike Tyson of old as well either. But you know what, man? I think it's going to somewhat elevate the sport of boxing just for the meantime, okay? And folks who are against it and who are complaining about it, yes, we know they're not going to be the original Mike Tyson and the original Roy Jones. But remember, they're bringing interest to a sport who really needs it right now with everything has been going on as far as, a lot of the fights not doing well as ratings. I think if nothing else, this provides instant ratings and just overall interest that can help the sport in the, immediate future.
That's very well said, and you're right on the money, brother, on all points. And I know that's why they actually introduced judges into this fight. A lot of people were getting turned off about it possibly being just an exhibition. And Tyson and Jones, they're like, look, people aren't going to pay $50 to see this if they don't think that it's going to be a fight. And we have to promote it as a fight. Did you hear him go nuts in his last promotional spot for Triller?
Loved it. Yep. Loved it. And
oh, my gosh, it was fascinating. Guys, if you haven't seen it, I'm currently writing an article about this on Fight Saga, and I'll be posting the Triller spot. But, yeah, Tyson seems to be, is like, what do you think, this is vaudeville or something? You think it's a carnival? No, this is a fight. No. Both Roy Jones and I, we're gonna fight. Like, I don't care if it's 12-ounce gloves. I don't care what you think this is. This is going to be a fight, and we have to make it a fight. Because what do you think is going to happen if casual and mainstream audiences, right, a massive casual and mainstream audience, what happened the last time they were expecting to see a fight and it didn't deliver? And I'm going back to 2015 now and Manny Pacquiao versus Floyd Mayweather Jr. What happened? What was their reaction, and how bad was it for the sport of boxing, Rodney, when they paid $100 to see two guys tangle, and it was a technically defensive, safety-first fight by both guys?
Well, here's the thing. You can look at it as, I look at Roy and Mike being beloved for their previous efforts and accomplishments. And that, they're just going to go out there and make it happen. Unlike Floyd and Manny Pacquiao, the public waited forever. They waited forever for these guys to get in the ring, and it just didn't whet their appetite, okay? And I believe they're going to be a little bit more lenient with Roy and Mike, to be honest. And as I said, we have to have a level of expectations, okay? We really do. And, I think that the public will accept it as long as the guys don't try to just say, we're going to get in there and take their money and not give them their value or the worth of the dollar that they spent. And I think that was the biggest issue with Floyd and Manny Pacquiao. Man, it was a fight of the century. It was something that at the time, what was it? Was $100 over $100 for a pay-per-view, if I'm not mistaken.
$100 exactly for the pay-per-view. Yep.
Yeah, which was unheard at that time. Unheard. Yep. And the public just didn't take well to it after the final product.
No, well, they were suing. They were suing the promoters and the cable distributors. They wanted their money back. Right. They either wanted refunds or they were suing them for their money back. It was shocking.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'll say this. Mayweather versus Pacquiao ended up reminding me of Geraldo Rivera's Al Capone's Vault. You remember that back in the 80s, Rodney?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it reminded me of. And to be honest with you, it's kind of become en vogue for sports fans who aren't diehards and are casual and mainstream. Like, they'll tune into the occasional big fight and they'll order the occasional big fight. But to that demographic, it's almost become en vogue to kick the sport of boxing while it's down. Right. It wouldn't surprise me if this thing didn't resemble a fight, right? And if it was a square dance contest and it was cookies and milk, they'd get really pissed off and they would take it out on the sport of boxing. Even though this shouldn't be a representation of all of the great active matchups that are going on. But you know as well as I do that this is going to be the highest grossing pay-per-view all year. Oh, boy.
I think you're going to get a combustible mix of diehard Roy Jones fans, diehard Mike Tyson fans. And, again, the promoters are going to have to really do a job and do their homework to where it doesn't leave a stain on the sport. But, look at it. I can see this trend starting to happen because, if you look at UFC, they're being creative with some of their matches. And even if you look at the last fight with Demetrius Andrade headline, didn't they have like some YouTube?
Oh boy, yeah, he had YouTubers opening up, fighting in the co-main event. So YouTubers are going to be competing on the undercard of Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones. So again,
things are changing, and promoters are trying to find a certain balance with, trying to incorporate new tactics, new entertainment concepts to really grow the sport and not just be in the red every time they have an event. And again, these are some challenging times for these promoters right now. Very challenging times, and we'll see what happens with these new concepts.
Well, I'll say this, Rodney, and as much as I respect the promoters trying to, reach deep into their bag of tricks, trying to actually do anything to promote these events, right, to bring mainstream and casual exposure, right? As much as I respect that, brother, all you have to do is remember, put together the fights that the fans want to see. The fans are the real bosses of boxing, which brings us to our next question from the mailbag, brother. And there's another question from Antonio. This is directed towards you, Rodney. Lou DiBella, he says, Lou DiBella brought up a good point on Chris Mannix's podcast the other day. He said, why can't all the promotional groups come to an agreement about making mega fights? Like Pacquiao versus Crawford, like Canelo versus Andrade. Boxing needs a good shot in the arm because the UFC is kicking its ass with decent mid-card events. Thank you for your question, Antonio. And Lou DiBella insists that this is the biggest dilemma with boxing today. Do you agree with that, and why or why not, Rodney?
I mean, it definitely is a dilemma, and it's no concrete answer I can give you. I will say that you do have egos that's involved, okay? I do believe that you have individuals who have a financial gain or investment and may not be willing to risk that investment at the time, or but it's mitigating circumstances around that. But I agree with Lou. It is an issue. When will it be that climate change? I go back to this, though. One of the reasons why Duran, Sugar Ray, Tommy Hearns are all loved, no matter if they fought each other or Hagler, if it ended in knockout, controversial decision, whatever. Well, guess what? They fought each other. You're not going to say that, Hearns knocked out Duran and Duran is a bum. No. His legend is he's one of the greatest fighters ever of all time, regardless.
Yeah.
So somehow, some way, that, mindset has been lost, and I think the public continues to suffer from that type of syndrome, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, like Mike Tyson recently said, guys were killers. Guys used to be killers. We were fighters in my era. Now they're businessmen.
Yeah.
I think he's spot on. But one thing I was surprised, right, and I'll just say this, and, you're absolutely correct, Rodney, and it's a great response to that question. But one thing I will say about this, right, and Big Lou knows better. Big Lou DiBella, he knows better. It's like, dude, he's a promoter. He's a Harvard graduate. He's a former head of president of sports programming at HBO. He knows better. Now, this is what it's easy for him to say. Oh, yeah, cast aspersions on the other promoters who have all the TV dates and have all the talent because he doesn't have jack poop right now. And he knows better than anybody. You cannot just put two names together and say, okay, well, there's a fight. There has to be a demand. Let me ask you something, Rodney. Both men would want a boatload of money for such a tough assignment. He brought up Canelo versus Andrade, right? How much do you think both men would want for that fight? And there's not a huge demand for it. Would there be enough money in the pot to support that event right now as it stands? Or would Andrade have to fight someone like Gennady Golovkin in order to create the demand for a big Canelo fight?
Again, Andrade would have to fight someone to create that groundswell of interest.
That's right.
But at the same time, is the top fighters really looking to fight Andrade? We got to ask ourselves, I don't see too many people anxious to get in the ring with him right now.
No.
So
he is one of the more avoided title holders in all of boxing. He's in that same category with both Devin Haney and Terence Crawford. he is such a no, and here's the problem, right? Demetrius Andrade should just say, look, Eddie, just stick me in the ring with anyone right now. Because I'm a counterpuncher. What happened, Rodney, the last time he was featured earlier this year before the pandemic on DAZN? Yes, he's one of the more skilled fighters in all of boxing. He's one of the craftiest counterpunchers in the sport. And how did he look that night?
Yeah, it wasn't how should I say, bona fide.
Well, he showed a lot of rust. He showed a lot of rust, and the reason why, he's a counterpuncher. It's contingent on him being active and having that time in rhythm. It's going to be a little off if you don't stay active. He needs to stay active. And also, styles make fights. To be honest with you, Rodney, this is what I would do if I were Eddie Hearn. I would go after, and they're both contractually obligated to fight on DAZN. I would go right after Gennady Golovkin because that style is tailor-made for a prolific southpaw counterpuncher and a very athletic guy like Demetrius Andrade.
I said 4 years ago, Demetrius
I remember.
Andrade. You know what? I say it even more convincing now. Man, he's tailor-made for Andrade, and I wouldn't be surprised if Andrade, if he steps on the gas, he'll knock Golovkin out. I really believe, because Golovkin is not the fighter that he was 4 years ago, but that would be a great platform to get the bells ringing for a Canelo and Andrade fight and really showcase Boo Boo's talent, which would be great for him. And Eddie Hearn, too.
That's exactly right. And, again, a guy like DeBella knows better. You can't just throw two names out there and say, okay, guys, let's make the fight. If it's a big-time elite-level matchup, you have to nurture that matchup to maximize that earning potential. Big Lou knows this. So, guys, that's a huge misconception, right, that most fans have. Hey, you know what, how come these promoters can't work together and make these fights? Well, it's not that simple. Let me ask you this, right? You take a guy who's contractually obligated to fight on DAZN, right? Like Gennady Golovkin. Or, or Anthony Joshua, right? Or anyone. Or Canelo Alvarez. And then you've got maybe a top-ranked fighter who's contractually obligated to fight under that banner and who has all the TV dates at ESPN. How do you make that fight happen? Well, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of doing. Like we just saw it earlier this year, PBC, but once again, Deontay Wilder, most people don't realize this, he's a free agent. He can fight anywhere on any platform. So what happens if you have guys who are contractually obligated to fight on two different platforms? Well, that takes a lot of doing, as we saw, guys, with Showtime and HBO putting together Mayweather versus Pacquiao. It's not that easy. So if they're going to go through that much effort, boy, there had better be some gold, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, because it just isn't worth it then, right? It's not that simple. People need to realize it's not that simple, guys. It's a lot easier said than done. But I tell you what, thank you so much for the question. Last course of business, Rodney, before we say goodnight to everyone. And I mentioned this on the show on Friday, and it's funny. I had fans actually telling me, oh, you don't know anything about boxing. Dude, a fan actually called me a casual the other day for saying this on the show. Now listen to this. I said on Friday that there's no way, okay, when the gauntlet was thrown down by WBC, when they demanded saying, okay, after this trilogy fight takes place between Fury and Wilder, the winner of that has to immediately defend the WBC Heavyweight Championship against Dylan White. And I said, you know what? They're just posturing, because there's no way in Hades that either Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder, should he win, there's no way in hell that they're going to postpone the biggest money fight in boxing right now, which would be a unification bout with Anthony Joshua. They're simply posturing. Mandatory my ass. Rodney, your thoughts on this? And so the reason why I'm bringing this up, I feel vindicated. It was just stated by both Bob Arum and Frank Warren, Tyson Fury's two promoters currently. They're saying absolutely not. The WBC, there's no way he's going to fight Dylan White before he fights unification bout with Anthony Joshua. Tyson Fury would much rather ditch the WBC title before that happens. Your final thoughts on this, Rodney, because we're over time, but your thoughts on this. I mean, this is just the business of boxing, brother.
Yeah, it's just common business. Again, you have a chance to make history on a higher platform with fighting a guy like Anthony Joshua. As we know, if you fight heavyweight, anything can happen with, Dylan White. I still believe Tyson Fury would beat him, to be honest. But at the end of the day, you have to fight and take the most, I guess, go for the fight at Fury stage that really makes the most financial and business sense. He's proved himself. He doesn't have to come to a organization that says, well, you better fight this person or that person. I would ditch the belt, go ahead and line up Anthony Joshua, make history, and at that point, to me, Tyson doesn't have anything else to prove. His legacy will be cemented. He will go down as one of the all-time great heavyweights, I believe, if he wins in dramatic fashion against Wilder again and beats Joshua. Yeah, he can go off to the sunset then. He's done what he needs to do and, figure it out. But I wouldn't even give a thought to, fighting Dylan White when you have two bigger fish on the plate with two massive incomes that will follow back to back. Take that money and fight those boys and go ahead and create your legacy. And if you want to walk away after that, or continue to fight. But to me, man, it won't be too much out there for him to do if that's what he fights those guys consecutively, in my opinion.
Indeed. It's just business 101, and you're right on the money. And you're absolutely right. And very good point, Rodney. This is the heavyweight division. Why would you risk getting knocked out and ruining the biggest money fight in boxing? It just makes no sense. That is it. Once again, with or without the WBC heavyweight title, should he win the trilogy match, which most people think he's going to, okay, you're still the ring. You're the ring lineal heavyweight champion with or without the WBC title. Again, guys, this is just boxing 101. Yeah, can you believe a fan actually had the nerve to call me a casual brother after almost 20 years in the business?
Surprised, but not surprised, though. So,
Oh, well, I tell you what. So I guess Bob Arum and Frank Warren are two casuals also, right? Okay, two Hall of Fame promoters. Right on. All right. So that's just about it. I tell you what, we want to thank Antonio and Big Luke for their questions. Rodney, your parting shots, brother, before we say goodnight to everybody.
Man, it just feels good to be back, grateful, and I hope the boxing fans and public are grateful as well, too. At the end of the day, we may not have boxing what we are used to or accustomed to, but at least we have something to talk about and discuss, and that's a blessing within itself. So, man, you guys have a good night. Look forward to hearing from you and talking to y'all again.
Guys, he's Rodney Green. Thank you so much for being on the show, Rodney. God bless you, brother.